and welcome to today's episode of Confessions of a Yarn Addict. My name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns and I teach knitting workshops, and I live in the southwest of England, where it is quite sunny today. It is a Sunday, and this is going to be a slightly different episode of the Confessions of a Yarn Addict podcast. Basically, the last couple of weeks, no, the last 3-4 weeks, basically since I came back from Spain, middle of March, just after the middle of March, they're probably about 4 weeks now, I think. I've been working flat out on a new magazine design. So I came home and I had to immediately cast on for one design, which I finished in, I don't know, 2 weeks. And then I immediately had to cast on for this design that's currently on my needles, which I have to, I'm actually quite early on this one because I might finish it today. Deadline is not actually until the week after Easter. Deadline is actually the day we leave for Wonderwall. I'll tell you more about Wonderwall later. So I'm filming this on a Sunday. It's going to be out on Friday, Good Friday. And I should have released this episode last week, but I didn't because I felt like I hadn't really been doing much knitting, which isn't true because I've been knitting non-stop, but I haven't been doing any knitting I could really share. So the first deadline design I worked on when I came back from Spain, I may have shared a tiny snippet of it in the last episode, I can't remember, but I couldn't really share it because it's for a magazine design. This I can't really share because it's for a magazine design. I'm going to share a little tiny snippet of it later, but I can't show you any details of what it looks like. So that's a bit difficult because that's the only knitting I've been doing. I've not been working on any other projects at all. So I've actually just done a COVID test before I started filming this. It is still processing. So a family member has COVID, somebody who came home. They actually came home, she started having cold symptoms and kept testing every day, and it was negative, and it was just a mild cold. So we just carried on as normal because she was testing negative every day, and then on day 4 she tested positive. So she's now being confined to her bedroom and has to wear a FFP2 mask if she leaves the bedroom. Very strict in this house. I keep opening windows to air out. I wear a mask if I'm in the same room as her, so if I have to take her food or drinks, or if she comes downstairs, I put a FFP2 mask on. Got one. I also put one on every time I walk up and down the stairs or through the hallway outside my room, so I got my mask here ready to put on when I go downstairs. So we're very strict. Simon and I even wore a mask in the car yesterday when we went out to take Alfie for a walk. So the rules in the UK at the moment is that you don't have to isolate if you have COVID, which I think is wrong. You don't have to isolate if you've been in close contact with somebody who has COVID, which I'm also not 100% happy about. So what we've decided to do is that COVID patient will isolate. She's fine. She's just got a mild cold at the moment. And me and Simon are being careful. So I did pop to a supermarket yesterday just to get a tiny bit of food, but I wore my FFP2 mask. I went in, got what I needed. I used the self-service checkout. I got out as quickly as possible. I put my mask on before I left the car, and I kept it on until I was back in my car, so I'd avoid contact with people and it wasn't very busy. And you know, there could be people walking around there knowing they've got COVID, but they can legally do it. So, and I don't agree with that. And then we took Alfie for a walk up on the moors, and we deliberately chose a place where we knew that we're unlikely to meet anyone because it's a very deserted area. Not very many people walk their dogs there. So plus we're both testing every day, and so far we're both testing negative, and I don't know how long my test's been processing for now, but there's no line yet, so I think it's negative. But I thought I'd do it and then let it process while I record this video. Anyway, that's a very long introduction. I may cut some of it out, we'll see. So in today's video, I thought I would do things a little bit different. So I've seen a few people lately do like a sort of knit and chat video, and I quite fancy doing that. And then I've also seen people, a couple of people talk about kind of controversial or unpopular knitting opinions. I'm not sure they really are controversial and popular, but just different things that I hear people say when I'm out and about, when I go to knitting groups, if I go to knitting shows, if I teach knitting workshops. You just hear people say things that I may or may not agree with. So I thought I would go through some of those things today and give you my opinion on those things. So before we start, I'm wearing, I think it's called Traverbin. I should have checked, but I forgot. Let me just stand up. I got my knitting in my lap. Let me just stand up and show you. I may insert a photograph of it properly modelled so you can see it properly, but I did have my window open a minute ago just to air it out a bit in here, but I closed it, and I don't really like the top I'm wearing, but I wore it because I thought we were going to walk the dog in a minute, and I've been doing a bit of housework and stuff, so I thought I'd just put this over for the video. And I really like the colours, so, but it is quite warm because it is wool. I will put the link to that pattern below, and I'll, if it's not called Traverbin, I'll put the real name on the screen because I'm terrible at remembering my own things. So I'm going to try and knit while I talk to you. I couldn't set my video angle so you can see my face and my knitting, so I'll try and hold it up. I am knitting a big pink thing. I'm not showing any details. I am on the edging, so I'm hoping to finish it today. I got done the first 2 rows of the edging, so I got another 8 rows to go. I am on a lace row. I probably should have done this when I was on the pearl row, because I do have to look at it a little bit more when I'm on the lace row. I don't really have to look at the pattern because it is a fairly easy pattern. Once I've done the first row of the lace pattern, it's fairly easy to just carry on knitting. So I'm going to try and knit on this while I'm talking, but it means I won't be looking at the camera most of the time. I need to try and sit so you can actually see what I'm doing. I don't normally hold my knitting this high up, but I will do while I'm doing this, just so that it doesn't look like I'm just sitting here fiddling with something in my lap. Let's try and hold it up so you can see what I'm doing. I guess a lot of knitters knit for friends and family at Christmas time, and then when they get to Christmas, they're probably getting a little bit fed up with that, and they want to do a bit of selfish knitting. I kind of hate that term because it makes it sound like all our knitting should be stuff that we knit for other people, and I don't believe that. I think that, I mean, people have different reasons why they knit. Some people knit because they enjoy knitting. Some people knit because they enjoy wearing what they knit. Some people knit because they feel like they want to. They either want to or they feel obliged to provide items for family members. And any of those are reasons to knit, as long as you're enjoying it. I think if you're not enjoying your knitting, you probably should find another hobby, but these days we don't have to knit to provide clothing for ourselves or our families. It's probably cheaper to buy it. So I don't think that's the reason to knit, like maybe it was even when I was growing up in Norway. The best way of getting a thick warm wool sweater was probably for my mum to knit it. Same with woolly socks. I mean, you could buy them, but the ones you knitted were probably better, and that's probably still the case. But you can buy perfectly good clothes now. You can buy warm clothes. There's no reason for us to knit just to provide clothing for ourselves, just like there's no real reason for us to sew to provide clothing for ourselves, and that quite often it's actually cheaper to buy these things. But we still like knitting, so whatever reason you knit is fine. If you mainly want to knit for other people, that's absolutely fine. You do what you want to do, but I don't like this term selfish knitting. It makes it sound like, let me move the camera away a bit just to see if you can see my knitting better then. You also see the mess on my desk, so apologies for that. I should have tidied it up. But to me, selfish knitting makes it sound like guilt, like I'm being selfish. I'm doing something for me and that's selfish, and I don't think that's right. I don't like the idea of selfish knitting. If you want to knit something for yourself, then you knit something for yourself. I don't like the selfish label attached to it. It's just like taking some time out to do something you want to do. It's a selfish thing. Taking some me time is a selfish thing. I don't really like the me time thing either. You know, we all need time to do stuff. Some of us need more time on our own than others. You do what you want to do. If you want to knit something, you knit something. Don't use the term selfish knitting. Personal knitting, maybe. Like, I've been knitting a lot from friends and family and grandkids and whatever, and now I want to knit something for myself. That's fine. But I don't like the term selfish knitting. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with that, or do you not? I also think that sometimes we use these terms and we may not be that serious. So I might say selfish knitting, as in I'm going to knit something just for me that's not going to turn into a design, for example. But I don't mean it as in selfish, like I'm being selfish. It's just a term we use. And I do think that sometimes these things, sometimes we maybe don't mean exactly what we say, and we're just being a bit kind of like jokey about it, and I think that's fine as well. But whatever reason you knit whatever you want to. You knit for whoever you want to. If you don't want to knit for family and friends and you just want to knit for yourself, you should knit for yourself without feeling guilty about it or without feeling it's selfish. So that's what I think about selfish knitting. Okay, so the next thing is knitting with chunky yarn. So I've noticed this is a knitting trend that we see quite a lot in the knitting world. Chunky yarn's quite popular, especially with newer knitters. It's very popular with people who maybe don't have as much time to knit as they normally do, who maybe want to be a little bit, they want their knitting to grow a bit quicker. Let me just see what I'm doing here. There we go. And they knit with chunky yarn. That's fine. If you want to knit with chunky yarn, absolutely fine. I personally don't like chunky yarn, and the reason I don't like chunky yarn is because, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, I don't like wearing anything made in chunky yarn because it's usually too warm for me. Other problem you got with chunky yarn, so the problems you can get with chunky yarn is that, one, it can quite often be too warm. Two, it can quite often be heavy. Depends on the yarn composition, how it's spun, the fibre composition, and also the stitch pattern that you use to knit whatever you're knitting with. So if you're knitting a garment in chunky yarn, it can make the fabric very heavy, and then gravity takes its course and it stretches. Especially, so if you're knitting a, let's say, chunky cable sweater in cotton, I mean, that would probably be likely to stretch. Chunky wool sweater may not do. But personally, I don't like chunky. I've also heard people say that it's not very flattering, and I'll come back to that maybe later. I don't know whether that's on my list or not. No, it's not. So let's tackle the flattering question as well. Flattering is usually meant to mean, if somebody says that looks very flattering on you, they usually they tend to mean it makes you look slimmer. And I think that's a problem. I think if they say something that looks flattering you, that it makes you look good, I think that's fine. I think if they think it makes you look good because it makes you look thinner, I think that's a problem. Not everyone wants to look thinner. Some of us do, but many people don't. And I think saying things are flattering because they make you look thinner is a problem. Having said that, chunky can make you look bigger. So I guess I'm kind of contradicting myself. I personally don't like wearing chunky because it does make me look bigger. It adds centimeters, and I don't like that because I am not happy with my weight and I would like to be thinner, both for aesthetic reasons, I guess, and also for health reasons. Now, that's my view. You may or may not agree with me, and that's fine. That's not fat shaming anyone. That's just how I feel about my body, and that's fine. If you don't agree with that and you don't feel like that, that's fine. We can disagree, but that's how I feel about my body, and I'm entitled to feel how I feel about my body. But I still think we've got to be careful about the terms we use and not assume that everyone else thinks the same as us and not everyone wants to be skinny. I think we should all aim to be healthy, and I think you can be healthy at different weight points. Whether being thinner is healthier than being fatter, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I personally feel that my health would improve if I was a little bit lighter, but that's my opinion. Slightly off topic as well. So that's the other reason I don't like knitting with chunky, because I feel it makes me look bigger than I am, and it makes me too warm usually. So that's the two main reasons. The other thing I don't like about chunky yarn, and this comes into designing patterns and things, is that I think it's more difficult to design stuff for chunky because each stitch is so much bigger, you've got to be very careful about pattern repeats. So if you have a pattern repeat that's say 10 stitches in chunky or in lace weight yarn, I mean, I don't know whether I'm accurate, but say 10 stitches in chunky might be that big, I don't know. 10 stitches in lace weight yarn might be that big. So if you're knitting with thinner yarn, it's easier to grade the pattern to fit different sizes, because each pattern repeat takes up a smaller amount of space. So if I want to fit a 10 stitch pattern repeat across the width of the body, that's easier in a thinner yarn than a thicker yarn. It's also easier with smaller pattern repeats. If I want to, for example, have a pattern repeat that's got 20 stitches and I want it across the full width of the garment, that's quite challenging to make it fit all the sizes I need to make it fit. And you then end up with quite often with smaller sizes and fewer sizes, unless you break the pattern repeat up at the edges, which you can do, but you may or may not want to. So small pattern repeats are easier when it comes to designing. That's something I've learned from experience over the years. And designing with thinner yarns is easier, I think. Mistakes show less in thinner yarns. It's easier to see mistakes in thicker yarns, I think. And also with thicker yarns, you really have to, as a designing point of view, you have to think about the ease more. So you need to allow for more ease in the thicker yarn than the thinner yarn. But I think that's very specific to design. So that's some of the reasons I don't like knitting with chunky yarn or even Aran weight yarn. And I only have probably like 2 or 3 designs in chunky and not that many in Aran weight, to be quite honest. I tend to stick to DK or below. The next question is knitting with thin yarn. So a lot of people hate knitting with thin yarn. And I think this thin versus thick yarn is that knitting takes time, and a lot of people like knitting with thicker yarns because it's quicker. So they feel like they're making progress and they're achieving, they're finishing something. And I do totally get that. I understand that feeling. And the knitting with thinner yarn will just take too long. Well, here's one quite important thing. This is my number one argument for knitting with thinner yarn, is that it is much better value for money. So knitting with a thinner yarn is basically you will get more yarn for your money. You get more meterage or yardage for your money. So if you are knitting something in a chunky yarn, you may, I don't know, I should have probably checked this beforehand. Hang on, I've got a thing on the wall here. Okay, so I don't know whether this yarn is considered chunky or not. I'm just looking at some stuff I got on the wall. But yeah, so this is, I'm not going to say which yarn it is, and I don't know whether it's considered chunky or Aran weight, but it's quite a thick yarn. And it is 105 meters per 150 grams. And then there's another yarn which is a thin 4-ply, I would say a little bit thinner than 4-ply, or a thin 4-ply, and that's got 450 meters per 100 grams. Well, you need a lot more skeins of the thicker yarn than you need of the thinner yarn to knit a garment. So if you're knitting with a thinner yarn, your full garment cost will be cheaper. You might say, yes, but I'm also used more yarn, but yarn tend to be priced per skein, and the prices per skein for these is, so the one that's thicker, the price per skein is $25.90, so let's say 26. The price per skein, hang on, I can't see it, apologies. Price per skein of the thin yarn is £23. So with the thin yarn, let me get my calculator. I've just done a design in the thin yarn. I think it used, let's say you used 3 skeins, so that's, what did I say, 23. That's £69 if I use 3 skeins. That's still expensive. The other one is £25, 25.90. And let's say, because you're going to need a lot more, let's say you need double the amount, double the number of skeins. Let's say you need 6 skeins. That's £155. That's not a very scientific thing, by the way. Just checking my COVID test. So I do think that you need, thinner yarn is more economical. It will go further, and it will cost you less, basically. I've knitted a cardigan for myself. It was a crop cardigan with long sleeves in a hand-dyed yarn. I had 300 gram skeins, 400 meter per, approximately I think it was about 360 something meters per skein, so less than 1200 meters in total, and I managed to knit a garment for myself, and I'm quite big. So even though that yarn was expensive, it would have been a lot more expensive if I'd knitted it in chunky hand-dyed yarn. So thinner yarns are more economical. You can get a shawl out of 1 or 2 skeins depending on the meterage and the size you want. You can get a garment out of probably 2 to 4 skeins of lace weight yarn or 4-ply yarn depending on your size, maybe 5, 6 if you 4-ply yarn, if you're larger, 100 gram skeins I'm talking about. So thinner yarns are much more economical. Thinner yarn, knitting something from a thinner yarn would also take you longer. So if you're knitting something from a thinner yarn, it might take you twice as long as if you're knitting from a thicker yarn. So if you think about that, you are paying less for the yarn, and it's giving you better value for money. If you think about the number of hours of knitting you get from a skein of yarn, thinner yarn is much better value for money than thicker yarns. So my alarm for my COVID test has just gone off, and my COVID test is negative, so I'm still negative for COVID, which is good. I don't have any symptoms either, and I feel fine, so I'm just hoping I haven't caught it. So yeah, I think thin yarns are better value for money. I think they're more comfortable to wear. I think there are more options design wise with them. I also think they're also better when it comes to hiding any mistakes. Mistakes are more visible in thicker yarns. They're less visible in thinner yarns. So if you make tiny mistakes, or your knitting isn't perfect, there is more leeway with thin yarns. That's another reason why I like thin yarns. Another very popular knitting trend recently has been knitting with mohair held double with another yarn. So you hold a strand of, say a strand of this, which is a merino silk blend, with a strand of thin mohair yarn. Something like maybe Rowan Kid Silk Case, or that kind of yarn. A lot of people are familiar with that yarn. That's been very popular in the last couple of years, and I think I've seen it, I've seen pictures in patterns and on social media and that kind of thing, and I think, oh, that looks absolutely beautiful. It looks a bit fuzzy, it's very warm because you're holding 2 strands together, it's a bit warmer, and I think, yeah, that looks really nice, but I don't like knitting with mohair. So I knitted something before Christmas. I actually cast on for a hat, brioche hat, in mohair and hand-dyed sock yarn, held double, and I didn't actually finish it because I completely messed up the crown shaping, and I just ended up abandoning it. But I didn't enjoy knitting with the mohair. Beautiful mohair, but I was just covered in it every time I knitted with it. I was just absolutely covered in all that mohair. I wear a lot of black, so that's not very good if you're knitting with mohair. I just felt like every time I was knitting with it, I'd get up and then I'd be like just covered with mohair. Yes, I could put something on my lap to cover it while I'm knitting, but I'm still going to wear the thing and then get covered in mohair. I have used mohair yarns for magazine designs, and I used one for one of my books, Speeded Lace Knitting, I think it was. There was a mohair little crop cardigan thing in there. And some people love it. It's just not my thing. I'm not a huge fan of mohair. I do like the idea of holding a strand of something slightly fussy with a strand of normal yarn. And I am actually thinking about using Surrey alpaca. So Surrey alpaca is a slightly hairier alpaca than regular alpaca or other breeds of alpaca. The Surrey alpaca is a breed of alpaca, and there's other breeds of alpaca, and Surrey is a little bit hairier. I'm not an expert of alpacas, but that's my understanding. And yeah, I do like it. It's not quite as fuzzy and hairy and sheddy, I think, as mohair. So I am thinking about trying that with some designs. Still sheds a little bit, but not as much. But yeah, I do think there are things about holding two yarns together that makes, I do like the look of it. I just don't like knitting with it. It can also be a bit of a pain holding two yarns together because it's easy to make a mistake and only knit with one colour, one strand and not the other strand. Less a problem probably with mohair, because mohair tends to stick to whichever yarn you're holding it with. But it is very easy to just knit through one strand and not the other strand. So you've got to be careful about that. But I think that's the main problem. But the main problem with mohair yarns for me is that they're fussy. But it is very trendy at the moment, and it is very warm, and I do like it, and I may explore it. And I may change my mind about it, who knows. This video to be too long, so let's see which other controversial. I've got quite a few on my list here, so I may actually have to do another video. Let's see, what should we do next? Why knit shawls? Let's talk about that one, because that's something I hear a lot. That's more of a question, really. I quite often see people saying, oh, why would you knit a shawl? I'd never wear a shawl. Do you wear all the shawls you knit? I mean, for me personally, whether I wear what I knit or not, it's not really the question, because I'm a designer, so I mainly knit them because I'm designing new patterns. I'm starting to try and be a little bit more mindful about what I design to self-publish. It's been something I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I've been doing a lot more magazine designs. I've been doing less self-published designs this year. And I am starting to think about more what I focus on when it comes to self-published designs, because I've increased the amount of work I do for magazines again. I used to do a lot of work for magazines, then I cut down on it to do more self-publishing, and now I'm increased the amount of work I'm doing for magazines again. And I am thinking about changing what I do as self-published design, maybe knit more for myself, design stuff that I'm designing and knitting because I specifically want that garment, rather than just because I'm hoping it might be a popular pattern. I don't know, we'll have to see. Something I'm still thinking about. But why knit shawls? Obviously I have a lot of shawls. I think the reasons people knit shawls is that they're fun. You can experiment with a lot of different shapes and stitch patterns and techniques without investing a huge amount of time and money. in comparison to knitting a sweater. Obviously that depends on what size you are. If you're knitting a big shawl, there may be as much knitting involved as it is knitting a sweater if you're a smaller person. But for most people, there's probably less amount of knitting involved in a shawl than it is in knitting a garment, unless you're quite a tiny person, maybe. Also, you don't have to worry about fit. So if you're knitting a garment, one of the problems a lot of people have with knitting a garment is making sure it fits them, and quite often people are disappointed in the fit. I do have a separate video on that coming out soon. And I think with shawls, you don't have to worry about fit, or accessories generally, but especially shawls and scarves and stuff, you don't have to worry about fit. One of the things people say, well, they don't knit shawl, is I don't wear them. And that's fine. You know, there's no reason why you should knit something you don't want to wear unless you enjoy knitting that thing. I've got loads of stuff I've knitted that I'm never going to wear, but that's because I was knitting them for a new design, especially if it's to go in a magazine. It's not going to be in my size. But I can see, you know, you may not want to knit something that you're not going to wear. That's fine. You don't have to wear shawls across your shoulders. I guess the stereotype is a little granny sitting in a rocking chair with a knitting and a shawl around her shoulder. Don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't have a rocking chair. I have sat in my knitting chair with a shawl around my shoulders when it's been chilly knitting. There's nothing wrong with that. I've sat at my desk working with a shawl around my shoulders. But most of the time I wear shawls as a scarf, so I bundle them up around my neck and wear them as a scarf as I go out. Shawls tend to be all kinds of different shapes, so they tend to be a bit more fun to knit than a traditional scarf, which tends to just be a rectangle. So when people say, why knit shawls? What do you do with all your shawls? Well, you wear them, and you just treat them like scarves. And I think most people treat them like scarves. This is the thing I saw on Twitter recently. Do non-knitters wear shawls? And I don't know if they do. Maybe some do, but I think probably most people who wear shawls, even if you wear them as a scarf, are probably knitters who've knitted them. And that's probably because most of the scarves that you buy commercially are just shaped as a scarf. They're just a rectangular. It's probably less easy. It's probably less availability of something that looks like a shawl sold in high street shops. So if you're just buying a scarf to wear, you're probably more likely to buy a rectangle. But I wear a lot of shawls, and I get compliments on them from non-knitters, and I'm sure if I knitted them one, they might wear it as a scarf. I think some people, when you say, oh, I'm going to knit you a shawl, they might go, oh yeah, but I'm not going to wear a shawl. But they might wear a scarf. So if you say, well, I'm knitting, you know, would you like me to knit you a shawl, but you can wear it as a scarf, they shouldn't have to wear it, and they might want to wear it. So I quite like knitting shawls, as you know, if you followed me for a while. But I tend to wear them as a scarf rather than as a shawl, really. And there's loads of fun techniques. Depends on what you're knitting. But if you haven't knitted a shawl, give it a go. You might get hooked. It tends to use less yarn. You can quite often combine different skeins of yarn. So if you have a lot of single skeins of, where is it? Over there. Single skeins of hand-dyed yarn, for example, like I do in the same yarn weight, you can combine them to make fun colour combinations and things. So I do think there's a lot of fun things about knitting a shawl, but it's not for everyone. Just like knitting socks isn't for everyone. Oh, that's another question I get, which I hadn't written down. Why knit socks? That's another thing you get, especially from non-knitters. Like, why knit socks? You can buy them much cheaper. And yeah, that's the case with most knitting. But I knit socks because, one, I enjoy it. It's usually, I tend to make them fairly easy, so they tend to be plain socks, and there's something I can knit when I'm concentrating on other things. I probably should have picked up a pair of socks to knit while I was recording this, because I'm not getting much knitting done on this shawl. Although I have nearly finished a row, and there are nearly 400 stitches per row, so that's not too bad. But yeah, maybe that's not, you know, I do get a question a lot, why knit socks? Well, because I like wearing them. They're warm, they're comfortable. I know somebody who goes to my local knitting group, who's also a friend of my husband's family. Her husband, well, I don't know whether he still does. He used to just wear her hand knitted socks. That was the only socks he'd wear. He'd wear them with walking boots, with normal shoes, with dress shoes and a suit. He just went hand knitted socks because he liked them. And I don't tend to wear them day to day very much, but I do wear them every night because my feet get cold in bed. So I do wear socks every night, even when I go to Spain in the summer when it's 30 degrees in the middle of the night and we got to have the air conditioning on. I wear socks because my feet are always cold, always. So, but again, if you don't like socks, don't knit socks. You know, we can all knit what we want to. So, you know, if you don't like socks, don't knit socks. But if you like socks and shawls, knit socks and shawls. If you don't like it, don't do it. If you haven't tried it, try it before you knock it. Okay, I'm going to talk about one more thing and then we'll finish the right side row. So that's the pattern row. So now I can just purl. So now I might actually get a little bit more done while I'm talking to you because I don't have to look at it quite as much. Clearly I do have to look at it a little bit because I keep glancing at it. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about, I've got quite a few other things on my list. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and I might do another one in a few weeks' time. But the last one I'm going to do for today is continental knitting is faster, or is it? And does it matter? So when I first started, when I first moved here, I realised very quickly that I was unusual knitting continental style. Non-knitters, when I used to knit in my lunch break at work, people would comment on the way I was knitting and saying I was knitting wrong. And then when I started teaching and going to knitting groups and knitting events, people would comment on my knitting style and say I was knitting fast. I'm not knitting quite as fast now because I'm talking, but people would comment on my knitting and say I was knitting very fast. And that's why I started teaching continental knitting. I was teaching sock knitting at a yarn shop in Devon called Spinny Yarn. The lady who started it, Joyce, asked me if I could teach socks, and I was like, well, yeah, maybe, I don't know, give it a go. So I gave it a go, and it went fine, and more people wanted to do it, so she booked me again. And then people kept commenting on the way I was knitting and interested in the way I was knitting, so I suggested to her, you know, should we try continental knitting, because I keep having people comment on my knitting style and being interested in the way I knit and why I knit this way. So we're talking probably nearly 15 years ago now, or around 15 years ago, so it's a long time ago. So we set up a continental knitting class, and for years that was my most popular class at that particular shop. And I also have it as an online class, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But every time I advertise my online class, one of the things that I mention is the fact that it can help you to knit faster. And every time I see somebody not comment on my post, but just like a general comment, which may or may not be in response to my post, I don't know, but like, why are continental knitters so obsessed with speed? Does speed matter? Is it really faster than English style knitting? All that kind of stuff. Continental knitting may or may not be faster than English style knitting. It depends on the knitter. I know English style knitters who knit very fast. I don't think I've yet met any English style knitters who can knit as fast as me. I haven't had a one-to-one competition with anyone. It'd be fun to do, but no, it's not all about speed. The main thing about knitting is that you knit in a style that you are comfortable with, that you enjoy, and that you are getting the result you want. That's the most important thing. But a lot of knitters do want to learn to knit faster, and a lot of people are saying they're interested in continental knitting because they do think it is faster, and that's fine. Other people say that they've heard a continental knitting causes less pain. I can't confirm or deny that, but it is something I hear very often. Because the movements are smaller, it does cause less pain in your hands and wrists and things. I don't know whether, I'm not saying continental knitters are not going to get repetitive strain injuries, because I'm sure there probably are some. I think alternating between two different styles of knitting can reduce the chance of pain more probably than just sticking with one style, because you use different muscles depending on how you knit. It's also valid to want to learn continental knitting just because you want to learn something new and you want to try it out and you're curious about it. It doesn't mean you have to change. I get people who come to my continental workshop realize that changing how you knit is going to be quite difficult, so they may not do it. And other people come and they really like it and they think they're going to prefer to knit that way, so they put in the practice and the effort and they change how they knit, and when I see them a few months, years later, they're still knitting continental style, and I love that. And I also have other people who've been to my continental workshops and next time I see them they're still knitting English style, and that's fine as well. For some people it's too difficult to change, it takes too much effort and they don't want to put in the time or the practice. Other people, they do put in the time and the practice, and they maybe find it a bit easier to change, and they never go back. It's entirely up to you. Some people alternate. Some people knit certain things continental, like if they're knitting stocking stitch in the round, for example. Some people prefer to knit English style if they're purling, for example. All kinds of reasons. Doesn't matter. Yes, I personally think that continental knitting is quicker for most knitters, but I'm not saying it's knitted for everyone, and it is. Learning a new style of knitting is not easy. You're not going to be an expert straight away, and you're not going to be super fast straight away, just like it is with any technique. The other thing I want to say is that at the moment I've got discount on all my online courses, including continental knitting. So I've got online courses in successful lace knitting, Scandinavian stranded colourwork and steeking, continental knitting, finishing techniques and socks. And all my online courses are 15% off until, I think it's around the 20th of April, but I'll put the link, and I'll put all the details below, and I'll also put it on the screen. And I'll put the code below as well. So if you're interested, look in the notes below and you'll find the code there and the link to where you can find all my online courses. They're all self-guided. You can start anytime. You work at your own pace. You can watch the videos as many times as you want. They're mostly videos. There are some PDF things as well that you need to read through, but most of it is videos. And you can take as long as you want. And I am available to answer any questions. Even though they're self-guided, I'm still there to help you and answer questions that you have along the way. So I'll put all the details of that below this video. Now, just very quickly tell you what I'm knitting with. So the yarn I'm knitting with is Orchidean Luxury Yarns. I'll put Abby's link below. It is one of her Schwade set. I don't know how you pronounce it. I think it's S-H Fade. Schwade. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's basically a fade set. I'm knitting it in the Mulberino base. So that's a 50-50 merino silk blend, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Mulberry silk merino. It is really gorgeous, and it is 5 colors. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I'm going to show you the wrong side of it, because then you can't see the stitch pattern. And I'm nearly finished. Hopefully I'll finish today. That's my plan anyway. Really gorgeous yarn. I've actually pre-ordered an advent calendar for Christmas in this base from Abby, so I'm really excited about that because I'm really enjoying this yarn. So I'll put Abby's link below as well. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more of this type of video, give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment. I do have other things that people may or may not find controversial or unpopular that I can talk about another time. Do you like it when I knit and chat? Would you like me to put the camera or maybe film in a different room so you can see more of my knitting? Is it distracting when I knit while I chat? Does it make me ramble too much? Let me know in the comments. I haven't done a knit and chat video before, so let me know what you think. Is it a good idea? Is it not a good idea? Do you not want me to do it again? If you have any, or you think might be an unpopular knitting opinion, leave it in the comment below, and I will give you my opinion maybe next time I record one of these. And also, if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, I'd like to do like a Q&A video. So if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, ask it below and I will answer it in a future video. Anything else you'd like me to talk about in these videos, let me know. I'll be back next week with a tutorial. I release videos every Friday, combination of these podcast episodes and tutorials. I try and do it every other week, but I did 2 weeks of tutorials because I felt like I didn't have anything to talk about. So I'll be back with another tutorial next week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and please leave a comment. And I will see you next time.